Let me tell you something. Something most men never realize until it's too late. Silence when used with intention isn't weakness, it's power, it's presence. It's the loudest language a man can speak, without saying a word. When a man stops chasing, when he goes quiet, when the calls stop, the messages stop, the "I miss you" fades into stillness. That silence doesn't go unnoticed. In fact, it echoes in the mind of the woman he once gave his energy to. At first, she might feel relieved, she might think, finally, some space. Or even tell herself, he didn't matter that much anyway. But that's just the surface, because the silence of a man isn't just an absence, it's a mirror, and over time, it reflects back everything she thought she was done feeling. You see, most women don't process the emotional weight of a relationship in the moment. They push it aside, distract themselves with friends, social media, or the illusion of moving on. But emotions aren't deleted, they're delayed. And then comes the night, when the world goes quiet. No one's texting, no one's calling, no one's validating her anymore. When the noise fades, and all that's left is her own mind, that's when your silence becomes deafening. She starts replaying conversations, your tone, your energy, your last words. She wonders, did he really mean what he said? Why hasn't he reached out? Has he already moved on? And just like that, your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was. But here's the key: the power of your silence only works when it comes from strength, not bitterness. When you're quiet because you've chosen peace over chaos. When you stop chasing because you choose self-respect over validation. That's when silence becomes transformational. But most men sabotage this. They break the silence too early. Not because they want to, but because they're afraid she'll forget them, afraid she's moved on, afraid of being invisible. But the man who stands firm in his silence, he understands one thing: you don't chase something that doesn't recognize your value. You don't scream your worth to be heard. You simply walk away and let the silence speak for you. And make no mistake, a woman may not say it out loud, but she feels it. She feels the shift in energy. She feels the missing presence. And the mystery of your silence slowly becomes louder than any argument, louder than any text you could have sent. So if you're in that space right now, if you've stopped reaching out, if you're wondering whether your silence means anything, it does, but only if you let it come from strength. Only if you use that silence to rebuild, to realign, to rise. Because when a man goes quiet, not to punish, but to protect his peace, that's not weakness, that's wisdom, that's dignity. That is the beginning of her awakening. There comes a moment when a man chooses not to speak, not out of anger, not to manipulate, but because he finally understands that silence can speak louder than any plea, any apology, or any goodbye. Most men never make it to that moment. They reach out too soon. They chase what's already running. They fear being forgotten, and in that fear, they lose themselves. But you're not most men. You're here for a reason. So lean in, because what I'm about to share might just change the way you see silence forever. Let me tell you something most men never realize until it's too late. Silence, when used with intention, isn't weakness. It's power, it's presence, it's the loudest language a man can speak without saying a word. When a man stops chasing, when he goes quiet, when the calls stop, the messages stop, the "I miss you" fades into stillness. That silence doesn't go unnoticed. In fact, it echoes in the mind of the woman he once gave his energy to. At first, she might feel relieved. She might think, finally, some space. Or even tell herself, he didn't matter that much anyway. But that's just the surface, because the silence of a man isn't just an absence, it's a mirror, and over time, it reflects back everything she thought she was done feeling. You see, most women don't process the emotional weight of a relationship in the moment. They often push it aside, distract themselves with friends, social media, or the illusion of moving on. But emotions aren't deleted, they're delayed. And then comes the night, when the world goes quiet. When no one's texting, no one's calling, when the noise fades, and all that's left is her own mind. That's when your silence becomes deafening. She starts replaying conversations. Your tone, your energy, your last words. She starts to wonder, did he really mean what he said? Why hasn't he reached out? Has he already moved on? And just like that, your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was. But here's the key, the power of your silence only works when it comes from strength, not bitterness. When you're quiet, because you've chosen peace over chaos. When you've stopped chasing, because you've chosen self-respect over validation. That's when silence becomes transformational. And the truth is, most men sabotage this. They break the silence too early, not because they want to, but because they're afraid. Afraid she'll forget them, afraid she's moved on, afraid of being invisible. So they send that text, make that call, apologize, just to be heard. But every time you break your silence, out of fear, you reset the game, you take her out of her emotional process. You relieve the discomfort she needs to feel in order to reflect. Because your silence, when held with strength, not resentment, becomes a mirror. And what she sees in that mirror is everything she overlooked, dismissed, or didn't fully appreciate when you were around. That's when the shift happens. That's when she starts feeling the cost of your absence, not because you begged, not because you explained, but because you stood still, you respected the space, and you allowed your energy to speak louder than any words. Here's the truth, your power isn't in chasing, it's in your restraint, it's in your ability to walk away and mean it, not with anger, not to prove a point, but because your peace is no longer up for negotiation. And the moment she realizes you're not coming back just to soothe her ego, that's the moment your silence stops being annoying, and starts becoming unforgettable. So if you're there right now, sitting in that quiet, don't rush to break it. Let the silence do what it was meant to do, because sometimes the loudest truths are only revealed when nothing is being said. There's a moment in every man's journey when he says his final words, walks away, and leaves nothing but silence behind. But here's what most men never realize until much later, those final words, they don't just vanish, they echo, not because of the words themselves, but because of the energy behind them, the calm, the clarity, the stillness in your eyes when you finally let go. When a woman realizes you're no longer chasing, no more texts, no more "I miss you" messages, no more late-night replies to her drama, her attention doesn't disappear, it shifts, and it always shifts backward, to that final moment. That last look, that last tone, that silence you left behind, not because she wants closure, but because your energy unsettled something inside her. She can't explain it, so she tries to decode it. Were you desperate, or dignified? Did you walk away like a man who needed her validation, or like a man who knows his value? Because women don't forget presence, especially when it carried emotional weight. And if you left with intention, with purpose, with unshakable self-respect, she will remember, not just for days, but maybe for years. In the silence of her nights, when the world goes quiet, when the laughter fades, when the phone doesn't ring, that's when she rewinds the tape. Your voice, your smile, your restraint, she reads your old messages with a different lens. listens to your voice notes again, watches your social media, but this time, not with confidence, with curiosity, and maybe regret. That's the beauty of stoic detachment. You don't explain yourself, you express yourself once clearly, then walk away with calm power, no chasing, no drama, no one last message. Just the quiet discipline of a man who's done the inner work, and no longer trades his peace for chaos. And make no mistake, she feels your absence, not because you're gone, but because you're no longer accessible, no longer controllable. And when a man becomes a mystery, he becomes unforgettable, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't say. So let me ask you, what was the last thing she heard from you? Was it noise, or was it stillness wrapped in strength? Because here's the truth, she's not haunted by your words, she's haunted by the man you became, in your silence. There's a difference most men don't fully understand, the difference between silence and avoidance. And believe me, women can feel it. See, avoidance is rooted in fear. It's the act of disappearing, because you're afraid to face your own emotions, or worse, afraid to face hers. You ghost her, you vanish, you convince yourself, I'm protecting my peace, but deep down, you're running from responsibility, running from discomfort, running from yourself. That kind of silence, it doesn't command respect, it confuses, it frustrates, and eventually, it kills any trust she may have had in who you were. But real silence, stoic silence, isn't about escaping anything, it's about owning everything. It's not the silence of a scared boy avoiding confrontation, it's the stillness of a grounded man who no longer needs to prove his worth with noise. Because here's the truth, when you're at peace with yourself, you don't need to explain your every move, you don't need to justify your absence, you simply let your energy speak louder than your words. And women, they feel that difference instantly. A man who avoids leaves them feeling rejected, dismissed, uncertain. But a man who goes silent, from clarity and emotional discipline, he becomes magnetic. Why? Because mystery rooted in strength is attractive. But mystery rooted in fear, that's a red flag. They won't always say it out loud, but they know, they always know. And here's where your power lies. When you choose silence from power, not from panic, you show the highest level of self-control. You don't react just to feel seen, you don't chase validation, you sit with your emotions, you process them, you rise above the need to fix what isn't yours to fix. This is the silence that commands curiosity. She starts to wonder, not out of confusion, but out of respect. What is he thinking? How can he be so calm? Why isn't he trying to prove anything? And whether she ever says it or not, she's watching, not just what you do, but why you're doing it. So ask yourself right now, is your silence rooted in fear, or is it built on self-respect? Are you withdrawing because you're afraid of conflict, or because you're done giving explanations to people who don't value your truth? Because only one of those choices earns respect, only one of those choices turns silence into strength. Remember this, avoidance is escape, but silence, real silence, is a strategy, and a man who chooses silence from wisdom doesn't need to raise his voice to be remembered. Let me tell you what most men miss. When a man pulls back his energy, when he stops texting, stops chasing, stops explaining, something very interesting begins to unfold. At first, it looks like she's moved on. She's posting stories, laughing louder than usual, surrounded by friends, as if nothing ever happened. But underneath that curated image, a subtle emotional game begins, not out of hate, not out of indifference, but because she wants to feel you again. And here's the catch, she won't say I miss you. She won't admit it outright. Instead, she'll try to provoke a reaction. She might post a cryptic quote that hits too close to home, upload a picture that echoes a shared memory, maybe even hint at someone new, just enough to ignite a flicker of jealousy. It's not communication, it's bait, and the question is, will you bite? Because this moment right here, this quiet, psychological tension, is where your strength is truly tested. Most men fail this part. They think, if she's posting about me, she must still care. I should respond. But here's the stoic truth: just because someone pulls at your emotions, doesn't mean you have to hand them over. Her actions aren't signs of peace, they're signs of unrest. She's not over you, she's wrestling with the void your silence created, and that silence, it's uncomfortable. It forces her to feel the things she tried to outrun. But here's where most men break. They react, they message, they validate, they reset the dynamic. And give her the control again. But the man who holds, the man who sees it for what it is, he becomes unshakable, and that silence, it becomes loud, it becomes deafening, because the woman who once controlled your emotions with a post, is now facing a man who can no longer be moved by theatrics, and that shifts everything. She might try again, she might escalate, send something passive-aggressive, even cruel, just to see if she can still pull you back in. But listen closely, that's not an attack, that's a disguised confession, a desperate attempt to confirm you still care. And if you reply, the game resets, she wins. But if you remain silent, grounded, focused on your own center, you win something greater than her attention. You reclaim your presence. Because the man who doesn't react, who doesn't chase, who doesn't break his silence just to feel seen, that man commands a different level of respect. And the truth is this: your silence, when it's rooted in self-control, not ego, not bitterness, becomes the most powerful response she never saw coming. You don't have to tell her you've changed. You don't need a long explanation. You don't even have to say, "I'm done." Because long before the words ever leave your mouth, she already feels it. That's the thing about women, they're emotionally intuitive. They might not always confront you directly, but they know when something shifts beneath the surface, when that connection breaks. Even if you're still physically present, still talking, still there, she senses it. Not the absence of communication, but the absence of emotion behind it. That spark, that presence, that silent, electric bond that once flowed between you, it's gone, and she can feel that emptiness. Even if no one says a word, most men don't realize this. Women don't hold on to your words, they hold on to your energy. And when your energy fades, when your emotional investment starts to withdraw, you don't need to explain. She feels it in the silence between your replies, in the way your eyes no longer linger, in the way your good morning feels like a chore, not a choice. Ironically, that emotional distance, that invisible pullback, is far louder than any argument could ever be. Because the human mind, it tries to close gaps, it fills in the blanks. So she starts wondering, is he pulling away? Did I do something wrong? Where did that connection go? And even if you're not trying to hurt her, even if you're simply protecting your peace, healing, or growing silently, the shift still registers, loud, clear, undeniable. This is why, as a man, you must be aware of your presence, because even your stillness speaks. Your emotional silence is like a frequency. You don't have to say it, you transmit it, and when that signal goes quiet, she listens more carefully than ever before. She replays your last message, reads between the lines, watches the timing of your replies, analyzes the emotion behind your words, not the words themselves. So ask yourself honestly, are you still emotionally connected? Or are you just physically there? Because once the emotional rope is cut, no closure, no conversation, no apology will ever be enough. Here's your stoic reminder: you're not responsible for how she interprets your silence, but you are responsible for making sure your silence is honest, not manipulative, not avoidant, not a weapon, but a boundary, a signal of maturity, a space for self-respect. So if you've outgrown the connection, don't stay to explain, let your absence speak, but let it speak with dignity, not in a way that blames her, but in a way that honors your own growth, because sometimes, the most powerful message isn't a dramatic goodbye. It's simply becoming someone she can no longer emotionally reach, and that's when she truly realizes, you didn't just leave the room, you disconnected. Let me tell you something that no one talks about. When you go silent, when you walk away with peace, not drama, when you choose not to chase, that's when the real story begins. Because her first reaction, it's not always heartbreak, it's substitution. She might go out more, post stories, laughing louder than usual, even flirt with someone new within days. But don't be fooled, it's not confidence, it's compensation, not because she's over you, but because she wants to convince herself that she is. That's how avoidance works. It looks like healing, but underneath, it's just noise meant to drown out the silence you left behind. That new guy, that sudden glow up, that perfectly timed post, it's not strength, it's theater, a performance to distract from the echo of your absence. Because here's the truth, you can't replace presence, not when that presence was calm, grounded, real. You can get attention from anyone, but connection, that's rare. And if your connection had emotional weight, she's not replacing it, she's postponing the pain, and the longer she pretends, the more the comparison game begins. She starts measuring his voice against yours, his mindset against your clarity, his presence against the stillness you carried, and every time she compares, she loses a little more of the illusion. Here's where most men panic. They see her with someone new and spiral, they react, they reach out, they try to reclaim what's no longer theirs to fix. But you don't flinch. You stay grounded, focused, unmoved, not out of ego, but because your peace is no longer up for sale. You're not trying to win her back, you're winning yourself forward. That's the difference. Because silence, when rooted in growth, becomes louder than any performance she can put on. She may pretend she's moved on, but her emotions, they remember the calm, they remember the depth, they remember the man who didn't react, didn't chase, didn't beg, just stood still, and let time do the talking. And eventually, that silence becomes the standard. The man she thought she could replace becomes the one she quietly compares everyone else to. So if you're watching her try to prove she's fine, don't take the bait, don't interrupt her process, because real strength doesn't compete. It simply becomes irreplaceable, and your silence, it's not absence, it's power, and no matter how loud her distractions get, your peace always wins. Let me tell you something that no one talks about, not in public, not in those late-night texts, and definitely not in the silence she posts online. When you go silent, when you walk away with peace instead of drama, when you stop chasing and start reclaiming your center, that's when the real story begins. Because her first reaction isn't sadness, it's substitution. She goes out more, laughs louder, posts more often, maybe even dates someone new within days, not because she's healed, but because she's trying to prove to herself, and maybe to you, that she's already over it. It's not confidence, it's defense, it's her way of saying, I can still feel wanted. I'm still desirable. I'm fine. But behind the scenes, that quick replacement, that new guy, that confident mask, it's just noise, a distraction from a deeper truth. If she had truly moved on, she wouldn't need a stand-in, she wouldn't need to broadcast it. The urge to replace you instantly, it's not strength, it's avoidance. It's her way of skipping the uncomfortable parts, the grief, the silence, the realization That someone with real emotional presence just walked out of her life. Because here's the truth most men never see until it's too late. You don't just vanish when you leave with presence, you echo, and that echo, it lingers, especially when what she tries to replace you with doesn't measure up. Soon enough, she starts comparing the new guy's laugh to yours, his thoughts to yours, his understanding to how you used to just know without her saying a word, and piece by piece, the illusion crumbles, because deep down, she's not looking for love, she's looking for relief from the silence that's now louder than any attention she's getting. And here's where your power multiplies. You don't flinch, you don't compete, you don't respond to bait, you don't spiral through her stories at 2 a.m. You stay grounded, you stay still, you stay building, because the man who doesn't react becomes unforgettable. Your stillness becomes louder than her noise, and real emotional peace, that's magnetic. Fake happiness, it always has an expiration date. So if you see her out with someone new, don't panic. Don't assume you've been replaced. Some men aren't replaceable. Some energies can't be copied. And when you walk away with purpose, with silence rooted in calm, not chaos, you don't disappear. You become a benchmark, a presence that gets studied, missed, compared to, until no one else measures up, because that silence, it wasn't absence, it was power. And no matter how loud her distractions get, your peace always wins. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stopped reaching out to someone, not out of spite, not to play games, but because you finally chose yourself over chaos? And then, the silence began. But here's what most men don't realize. That silence, it plants a seed, a question, small, quiet, but persistent. What is he doing right now? That single thought, it starts as curiosity, but it never stays there. It spirals, because when you remove yourself, when you stop texting, stop checking, stop giving her emotional breadcrumbs to follow, your silence becomes a mystery, and mystery, that's power. See, women are emotionally intuitive. They can read a man's energy like a rhythm. They know when you're hurting, chasing, trying, but when your silence holds no bitterness, no desperation, no emotional leak, it short-circuits her intuition. She can't feel you anymore, and that's what gets under her skin, not the silence itself, but the unreadability, the calm she can't decode. So now, she starts to look deeper. She checks your stories, scrolls your page, watches the time stamp of your last message. She casually asks mutual friends, "Hey, you talked to him lately?" You become a question mark, a quiet mystery, a presence she no longer understands. And every time she sees you online, composed, present, unbothered, it hits her differently, not because she wants you back, but because she expected you broken, and instead, she sees you rising. Now her thoughts turn inward. Has he moved on? Did I matter that little to him? How is he okay without me? That's the paradox of stoic silence. It doesn't scream, it echoes. And here's the part where most men fail. They break it, they reach out, they ruin it with a "Hey, how've you been?" Not out of confidence, but out of fear. Don't do it. Don't trade your mystery for a moment of false comfort. Don't give her clarity, when it's your silence that's bringing her back to emotion. Because curiosity is powerful, confusion creates gravity, and that fog of emotion she's sitting in, that's where desire is reborn. This isn't about revenge, it's not about ego, it's about alignment, it's about showing without words, that you are not a man who waits in the background, begging to be seen. You're the man who walks away with purpose, who doesn't shout his value, but lives it in silence. And if she ever comes back, it won't be because of pity, it'll be because your absence became unforgettable. So let her wonder, let her scroll, let her think, because the man who can walk away with peace, who doesn't flinch, who doesn't chase, that man will always be remembered. Even in silence, let's make something clear: when a man goes silent, not to manipulate, not to punish, but to reclaim himself, that energy is undeniable. She feels it, even if she doesn't say it, even if she's smiling, even if she's posting pictures with someone new, because there's a difference between a man who disappears to make her miss him, and a man who walks away to rebuild the man in the mirror. One is chasing control, the other is chasing alignment, and women, they know the difference. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it in their gut, because energy doesn't lie. You're not just walking away from her, you're walking back toward yourself. Toward your purpose, your peace, your center, and that kind of silence, it doesn't come from bitterness, it doesn't come from avoidance, it comes from self-respect, from a deep knowing that your presence should never be a reaction to being wanted, but a reflection of your value. And here's the paradox most never see coming: the more you separate to elevate, the more undeniable your presence becomes. Not because you're flaunting it, not because you're trying to win the breakup, but because your stillness now carries weight. When she sees you again, whether it's in person or in a photo she didn't expect to come across, you won't need to say a word. Your posture will say it, your eyes will say it, your peace will say it louder than any speech ever could: I've evolved and I didn't need you to do it. And that's the shift, because a woman can argue with your words, but she cannot argue with your energy. She can't dismiss the calm you now walk with, the grounded confidence in your choices, the stillness that no longer begs to be seen. She'll realize that the old version of you, the one who needed her attention to feel whole, no longer exists. And what hurts the most? It's not losing you, it's losing access to the new you. So let this be your focus. Don't go silent to punish her, go silent to polish you. Turn inward, train your body, sharpen your mind, align your values. Let your evolution be so undeniable that even in your absence, you leave a presence she can't forget. Because when a man chooses solitude to upgrade, he never returns the same. He returns, reborn. And in that rebirth, you no longer need to be wanted, because now you've become worthy. Let me tell you something most men never understand, until it's too late. When you go silent, not out of spite, not out of pettiness, but from a place of peace, something powerful happens. Her memory doesn't hold on to the arguments, it doesn't loop the moments she dismissed you, or the nights she chose ego over empathy. No, her mind does something strange: it rewrites the past, because that's how the human brain works. It polishes what it can no longer reach, and suddenly, you're no longer the man who walked away, you're the man who listened, the one who laughed with her on rainy days, the one who saw her when she was invisible to the world. She starts to remember the way your voice calmed her, the safety in your stillness, the way you made her feel without ever needing to explain yourself. That's not manipulation. That's psychology, because when your presence disappears, and the noise stops, her brain fills the silence with imagination, not the full story, not the flaws, the fights, the misalignment, just the highlights, just the version of you she thought would never leave. And here's the part most men get wrong: they break the silence too soon. They reach out, just to feel seen. They text, just checking in. They call, just to hear her voice. But what they really do is interrupt her reflection, because silence isn't absence, it's a mirror, and in that mirror, she starts to see everything she missed, everything she didn't fully value, when she still had access to you. But that process takes time, time to feel, time to regret, time to replay the movie of a man who was solid and gone. And here's the stoic truth: you are not responsible for how she interprets your silence. You are only responsible for making sure your silence comes from clarity, not ego. Don't go silent to punish her, go silent to purify you. Because if she's replaying the past, make sure what she's watching is a man who walked away with calm power, quiet strength, and unwavering purpose. No drama, no final text, no performance, just peace. That's the version of you she'll never forget. That's the movie her mind won't stop playing. End segment. Because some men talk loud and leave no echo, but the man who walks in silence, with presence and poise, becomes unforgettable. Let me tell you something most men don't realize. There always comes a moment, a quiet moment, after all the silence, after all the space, after the memories have played over and over in her mind, when she finally breaks. But it won't be loud, there won't be tears, no dramatic phone call, no long message, just a subtle crack in her armor. It might be a meme she tags you in, a "Hey stranger" at 11:47 p.m., a reply to your story, pretending it's casual. But don't be fooled, it's not casual, it's calculated. This is the final emotional test. She's not just saying hi. She's asking without asking, are you still available for me? Do I still have emotional control over you? And this is where most men fail. They take the bait, they miss the connection, they want it back, so they jump in and spill everything. I missed you. I never stopped thinking about you. I still want this. But here's the hard truth, the moment you give her that, you hand all the power back. You show her you haven't grown, because this message, it's not just a door opening, it's a mirror, and how you respond will reveal who you've become. A man who chose solitude to rebuild, a man who doesn't seek attention but seeks alignment. That man doesn't fall for breadcrumbs, he pauses, he breathes, he asks himself one thing: am I responding from need or from presence? Because here's what most never understand, she's not chasing connection, she's testing control. And when you don't flinch, when you don't break your grounded energy for emotional validation, something shifts, respect returns. Because now she sees, you didn't wait, you didn't chase, you didn't freeze in her absence, you evolved. And that's what burns deeper than a breakup. Not the loss of you, but the loss of access to the new you. So listen closely, don't go silent to punish her, go silent to polish you. Train your body. Sharpen your mind, stand in your values, because when she reaches out again, she's not just reaching for you, she's reaching for the man she thought she could replace. And that's where your real power is, in stillness, in presence, in emotional integrity. The man who doesn't need to be needed is the one she begins to respect again, and where there is respect, desire follows. The man who walks away with peace doesn't just leave the room. He changes the atmosphere. Let me tell you something, most men don't fully grasp this. A woman never forgets a man who left, not with noise, but with calm. She may try to fill the void, she may laugh louder next to someone new. She may post more, flirt more, act unbothered, but at 2 a.m., when the room is still, when the new man isn't really listening, when the silence gets loud, she remembers, not because you chased her, not because you begged for her attention, but because you didn't. You walked away, not in anger, but in power. That silence, it lingers, it echoes, it speaks, not from bitterness, not from fear, but from a deep place of self-respect. It says, I no longer need this space to feel seen. I'm not here to be understood, I'm here to understand myself. I choose peace, even if it costs me comfort. And that message, it outlasts every word you could have said. She remembers your stillness, more than your explanations. She replays your calm, more than your chaos. She carries your presence, long after your absence. But here's what you need to understand, brother. You don't measure your worth by how fast she texts you back. You don't define your power by how much she misses you. You define it by how deeply you respect yourself, when no one else is clapping, when you hold your ground. When you stay silent out of principle, not pride, when you choose dignity over desperation, that's not weakness, that's self-mastery. You are not invisible, you are not forgotten, you are simply unavailable to the version of the world that no longer deserves access to your spirit, and that's what true maturity looks like, when you stop asking, does she still think about me? And start asking, am I proud of the man I'm becoming? That's when everything changes, because your silence, when it's rooted in truth, is not absence, it's presence, it's posture, it's power. So no, you don't break your silence just to prove you still matter. You live in such a way that your peace, your discipline, your evolution, make you unforgettable, is not the loudest in the room, it's the one who can walk away, with stillness in his heart, clarity in his eyes, and no need to explain who he is. Let your silence speak, and let it speak volumes.